Okay, so what can we advocate for? As a parent and an advocate, you naturally want the best for your child, right? We want them to have the very best education in the best environment. We want them to have the best opportunities to develop into the best version of themselves. But we can't always demand the best. In fact, very rarely does the law give us the right to demand the best. So what can we advocate for? We can advocate for a free, appropriate public education. That's what we can advocate for. So what does that mean? Well, really, we're looking at the word appropriate. That's what the law says we can advocate for. We can't advocate for the best. We can advocate for what is appropriate for our child. Okay, so what is appropriate? Well, we already know that it is not the best, because I just told you. So we know appropriate does not necessarily mean the best. It very rarely ever does. So what does it mean? It's really important for you to understand its legal meaning. This is the legal standard that courts are going to hold the school district to. Is what the parents are asking for appropriate? Was it appropriate that that should have been put in the IEP? The courts are going to look at it that way. So you need to understand what the legal meaning of appropriate is, because that's going to help you actually define the boundaries of your advocacy. If you can help determine what's appropriate for your child, that gives you the boundaries, and then you want to push to the edges of those appropriate boundaries, right? And try and get your child to have the most appropriate education they can have. But it's a problematic word to define in the law. And that's why we have to kind of look at the history lesson. It gives us a better idea of what the courts mean by appropriate. It's going to depend on the individual. What's appropriate for my son is going to be very different from what's appropriate for your child. And every kid, right? That's why we can't just say, here's an IEP. It has to be individualized. And what is appropriate for each person is going to vary from person to person. But like I said, you want to be able to help. You want to be part of the team that helps determine what's appropriate. Because that's where you can then push to the edges of the boundaries. You don't want the district necessarily setting the boundaries for you. They tend, just because that's their nature, to make the boundaries very small. And we want to make those appropriate boundaries as large as we possibly can to give our child the best, as close to the best as we can advocate for them to have. So you need to learn how to be an active participant in determining what's appropriate for your child. As you are actively participating in that, you're literally drawing the lines for the boundaries of your own advocacy. If you don't help them determine that something bigger and better is more appropriate for your child, then they're going to be stuck down here with something smaller and not as good. What is the purpose of IDEA? And like I said, there are 4 purposes. We're going to only talk about the first 2. You can look up this code if you want to know what 3 and 4 are. So number 1, to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a FAPE. It actually says free appropriate public education in the actual text. I shortened it for you. But so to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a FAPE that emphasizes special education and related services and is designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for employment and independent living. So that's the first purpose. So for me, the key words there are all children with disabilities should have a FAPE that meets their unique needs, right? There's more. Obviously, it's to prepare them for the future, and it should emphasize special education, but those are the big parts of it to me. And the second says is to ensure that the rights of children with disabilities and their parents are protected. So a whole nother part of IDEA is to protect your rights, to protect your child's rights. So there's a whole slew of rights that you have. Some of them you've heard about, others you've never heard about. I'd be really surprised if you didn't learn at least one new right during the course of this class that you didn't, before this class, know that you had under IDEA as either the parent of an individual with disabilities or the child, the individual with the disability themselves have rights as well. So free appropriate public education, what is that? IDEA defines it as special education and related services that are provided at public expense, meet state standards, are appropriate, and are provided in conformity with an IEP. So, okay, before we get there, I wasn't sure what my next slide said. Provided at public expense, that merely means you, as the parent, don't have to pay for the services your child should be getting at school. That's what the school should pay for, right? Public expense. It should meet state standards. So every state, has standards that they educate children to. So here, like for me, for my daughter, I don't have to go in and create an IEP for her because she doesn't have a disability. She's just getting educated to the state standards of California. And I hope that she meets those standards. In fact, I hope she excels beyond them, right? But I don't have to go in and create a specific program for her because Congress has established what those standards are. And by me sending her to public school, I'm basically saying those are good enough standards for us, educate her to those standards. So the IEP should still meet state standards. It should be tied to those types of state standards that our general ed students are working towards. And we're going to skip to the last one here, are provided in conformity with the IEP. Once you have an IEP and it's signed, it should be followed, right? That's what that last one is. So public expense, you don't pay for it, meets those state standards, and they conform to the IEP. Once we have one and it's signed, it should be followed. But let's go back up. We skipped appropriate. Well, that's the word we're trying to define. A free, appropriate public education has to be appropriate. They use their own word to define themselves. So it's very problematic. What do they mean by that? What does appropriate mean? So that's what we're going to spend a few minutes talking about. This is the legal standard that you need to understand because it applies to almost everything we're going to talk about in all of our future classes for this course. If you're trying to get a specific service, a specific goal for your child, they have to be appropriate. If they're not what the court would call appropriate, the school district's going to say, no, we don't have to do that. And even if you were to sue us at court, we would win because we don't think that's appropriate. So you have to figure out what appropriate means. And remember, it's individualized. What's appropriate for my son is different from what's appropriate for your child. So you have to help your team determine what appropriate means.